Welcome back to the channel, guys. If you're new here, my name is Josh, and on this channel, it's all about investing, wealth building, personal finance, and I'm always just baffled, if I'm honest, about all these stories of people who come into money really quickly, whether it's like lottery winners or athletes, and within no time at all, they've essentially got themselves in a massive hole of debt and they've lost everything. How is that the case? Today I want to talk about how if you come into a massive sum of money, like a lottery winning or an inheritance or whatever it might be, how do you make sure that you don't go bankrupt from it? An even crazier thing is on the happiness front. There was this insane study done at the University of Massachusetts, and they came out with a study that essentially said that if you win the lottery, okay, and someone at the same time becomes a quadriplegic at the same time, 1 year out, they have the same self-reported level of daily happiness, which is absolutely insane. It's like it really shows us about the hedonic adaptation is what we would call that. You kind of react to things emotionally when they happen and you incorporate the new information. Oh my goodness, I just made $10 million. And you get insanely happy for a second, or in the case of becoming a quadriplegic, as the study showed, not my word, you get extremely sad for a little bit and then things start to level out and you end up 1 year out kind of in the same level of happiness that you would have been. So for a lot of people, winning the lottery is actually maybe less of a blessing than it might seem at first. Before I get into how to not lose your money if you come into it, I just wanted to give a massive shout out to today's sponsor of this video, which is Railway Roasters. It's my favorite coffee that I drink on those late nights when I'm grinding away as a financial advisor, trying to make sure all my clients' requests get jammed in. I need that extra boost. So many of you guys were giving me such a hard time for always having Starbucks on my table. Now I have saved a ton of money by just buying coffee in bulk. Why would I spend money like $3 or $4 every single day on a coffee when I can just reduce my unit cost by many, many factors? So if you're looking to save money on coffee and get a great tasting coffee, hit the link in the description below where you can go find Railway Roasters and get yourself a bag of coffee. One of the things we know about coming into money really early is that it tends to leave really early. And I just stumbled into this article from Business Insider, which kind of talked about like the 20 worst, what would you call it, lottery management? I don't even know what to say it. But these 20 people who made the worst situation out of winning the lottery. And it was crazy. Some people decided to spend extremely lavishly, buy a bunch of cars. Some people went on insane travel and just increased lifestyle expenses. Some people got addicted to crack cocaine because they were probably so bored with nothing to do and all this money. And even worst of all, some people got poor legal advice and started a corporation and put the money in the corporation and divvied out shares to their family and had to pay a massive tax bill and then ended up in the hole, which is way worse than a crack addiction. Probably not, we can cut that part. So how do we avoid blowing money if it comes in a very fast way, specifically like the lottery or an inheritance or whatever it might be? Well, there's two ways we could approach this. It's like, okay, do you think you're really good with money, or do you think you're pretty average or maybe even out of the loop with money? And if you're pretty good with money, it's very simple because you understand the fundamentals of capital and investment. But Charlie Munger said it best. Wise men go bankrupt for 3 reasons. Liquor, ladies, and leverage. The 3 L's that will destroy you. Obviously, liquor, it's kind of like hedonism, sacrificing tomorrow just to have a bunch of enjoyment today. Ladies would be just trying to attract the opposite sticks. Sticks attract the opposite sticks. Ladies trying to attract the opposite sticks, which were usually to him, did I say it again? Sticks. Okay, that's one way to go bankrupt. And the last is leverage. Getting too excited about some investment opportunity that you put everything into one thing and it blows up. Now, if you're pretty smart with your money and you understand where this video is going, just avoid those 3. Charlie Munger really did say it best. But for everybody else, let's say you come into a massive pool of money. What is it that you do? I mean, this really goes back to like the fundamentals of financial planning and wealth creation 101, okay? And what I'm really trying to get at here is when you come into money, and even if you're just earning in your 9 to 5, what you have the opportunity to do is to put your income or a new lump sum of cash towards investments rather than expenses, okay? And what does this mean? Well, what we could do is we could take $1 million that we won from a lottery. It's probably usually even more these days. Some of them are insane. I mean, some of the biggest ones go for like $1 billion. But your average lottery, let's say someone wins $10 million, which is absolutely obscene. They buy a $2 million house, Right on? Well, first of all, if you live in America, there's going to be taxes on that, so maybe your 10 ends up being closer to 5. Now you buy a $2 million house, you're sitting at 3, you buy a few nice cars, you give some gifts to friends and family, and next thing you know, you're down to like $1 million or $2 million bucks, and all you have is a bunch of depreciating assets and a massive house you'll never be able to sell. Whereas, if you take what would be the investment approach to this problem, is what you would do is you take that entire lump sum of money and you would put it in a diversified portfolio of investments that can kick out a rate of return every single year that's consistent. And what you're doing now is you are replacing your need to earn an income with a big lump sum of capital. So to illustrate what I mean by this, I'm gonna show you guys just like what's called a Monte Carlo simulation. What it does is it takes like all the history of investing data and it says, okay, if we take like $1 million or 10 million bucks and throw it in an investment and we run it through 10,000 of the past historical scenarios starting from this day to go to this day, starting from this day to this day, this day to this day, and run it through a simulation of the past, what does it look like? How much money could we get out of that? Well, that's what I want to show you right now. Let's dive into that. So this right here is a total hack if you're interested in finance. It's called portfoliovisualizer.com. Just go look at it. It has so many awesome tools. But really, what I'm showing us here is, okay, we have an initial amount to invest of $1 million. And what I'd like to do is withdraw. What happens if we just take 50,000 of that out every single year? And yes, we adjust it for inflation to make sure that costs of living are included. And we do this for a period of like 50 years, which means if you're 30, it can carry you to 80. And if you're 50, it'll carry you to 100, right? So we're doing this for a 50-year period. And we're using historical returns. What would have happened in the past? Because the past can be our guide. Now, what I'm saying is we throw that in a diversified portfolio of investments rather than just blowing it on stupid stuff like crack and houses, okay? We look at what I mean by that. That's this asset allocation piece down here. I'm just gonna say, let's put 60% of that money in stocks in the overall stock market and 40% of the money in bonds. And what that's gonna do is give us a portfolio that's not so volatile that it's freaky to have $1 million in there, but is pretty stable and isn't gonna do anything too crazy. Now, when we run the numbers on this, what we find is some very interesting stuff. Well, what we're looking at is different percentiles here. Essentially, what happens in the best case, the 90th percentile, like the best 10% of times, and what happens in the worst 10% of times. Well, what we see is if we look at the average scenario of the 50th percentile, you would actually end up being able to take 50 grand out of that lump sum every single year and still have that accumulate to over $18 million. The whole thing has accumulated more and more, and you've been taking an income from it this whole time. The max that had ever declined while you were holding it, because investments do they're volatile, right? They bump up and down. Most you would ever see that money decline is like 24% in 1 year. And that's no joke, that's a solid amount, but you're never seeing that investment evaporate to zero over 10,000 different simulations. And lastly, here it shows us what percentage of the time do we actually end up positive? What percentage of the time do we end up having success? And typically, if you run a Monte Carlo situation, you probably want to make sure that 80% of the time it would be successful. And what that means is I invest this money from 50 to 90, there is an 80% chance of success that I'm going to be able to take that money out every single year. So this is really the solution to the problem. When you come into a lump sum of money, you have to think of that as what would be called investment principal. You don't want to dig into that principal or dig into that inheritance or dig into that dividend from a family business, whatever it might be. You want to take that money and treat it as if it's something to be invested that can then kick out money all the time. Now, I know what you might be thinking, like, well, then I don't get to spend the $1 million. Then I don't get to get the Ferrari and the nice house and all the cool stuff. Well, that's just such a surface level way of thinking about it, because you could live like a king for 3 years and then be bankrupt, or you could have your basic necessities covered for the entire remainder of your life. Which one of those is more satisfying? I mean, it might be really cool to flex for 3 years, but then you're back to the 9 to 5 on the hamster wheel. Why not actually guarantee yourself an income forever? And now you can spend your time doing things you really enjoy, like looking at your hobbies or improving yourself or tackling the problems in life that actually matter. So anyways, guys, I hope you learned something from this whole idea of like a Monte Carlo simulation and running this through the past and seeing what it could get us and looking at the real data of what it looks like to invest a massive lump sum of money and be able to take a recurring sum out of that to replace our income forever. That's really what I'm trying to think about when I'm helping people invest, is how do we get to the point where we replace your labor with capital? And that is so much better than having a Ferrari and then being bankrupt in a few years. So anyways, that's my take on what needs to be done with an inheritance or a massive lump sum of money that comes into your life. If you got any value out of this video whatsoever, make sure to hit that like button below to support the channel, hit subscribe, and turn on post notifications for more videos just like this one every single week. Until next time.